And I've also, importantly for me, shown how I've held myself to account for my actions, and that's what's becoming for me personally increasingly important, is this idea of holding myself to account for my practice, which I've never had to do before, despite having taught for many years. I've done it in a certain way, but I think I'm coming to understand that there's a different way of holding yourself to account, which self-study is allowing me to do. So, I just want to talk you through quickly some of the evidence that I can hold forward of how I can show my accountability. And these are some of the things over the last 2 or 3 years that I've done, some collaboratively with colleagues, some a little bit more on my own. The first researchy thing I did was actually presented at the early conference in Cyprus, which was wonderful. It was wall-to-wall sunshine, kind of the opposite of this really. It was sitting under trees, dialogue, talking. And that was presenting a collaborative piece of work that I had done with colleagues. And when I started off researching, that collaborative nature of the work was absolutely crucial to me as I dipped my toe in the water, if you like. So I presented that paper. Then I began to do my MA dissertation because we were asked to have an MA. We were expected to have an MA. So I took on an MA, which I completed in 2006. And that was a self-study inquiry. It didn't start off like that, but I quickly began to realise that that was actually this focus of how can I improve my practice. This was the only way that I was going to be able to get underneath that. What I did in my MA dissertation was I asked the question, how do I improve my practice? And I articulated my values throughout my MA, started off by doing that. I then put in some interventions, if you like, into my teaching to see whether I could actually see, coming back from students' interviews that I did, some improvement in my practice in terms of teaching the large groups. And then I made a claim to knowledge, was that I did know how to improve my practice. I then did a couple of other presentations, presenting at college, all of which are evidence of my accountability. This need I feel in me now to be accountable for what I'm doing on a deeper level than just ticking boxes. Now, this isn't really ticking anybody's box, but here I am, heart beating fast, trying to be accountable for my practice. So there's a big difference, there's a change in how I feel I need to be accountable. And I'm doing my doctorate with Newcastle. I'm in the first year of doing that, so all of these ideas are running around in my head. Accountability is surfacing. So my choice of methodology throughout, as I've said, has been self-study action research. That choice, it's almost happened that I can't think of any other way of doing it other than through self-study. And as I say, because the two things came together, my ideas of worries about my practice, alongside coming to understand self-study, the two things fitted together. And they come out of my ontological and epistemological stance. For me, and my move into St Mary's really highlighted this. For me, the relationship between myself and the learner, myself as a learner and other learners, is absolutely key. So when I lose that ability to be relational, I find that very difficult. And what I'm trying to do through my work is to say what I know about my accountability and how I come to know that. And I've also engaged very much with the ideas around personal knowledge. As a teacher for a long time, and somebody said this in something I saw yesterday, I domesticated policy. You know, I took strategies and took them into my classroom, took out the values from them, took out the things that I knew worked, and as a gentleman said yesterday, domesticated them. I used what I knew about my class, the teaching situation, to bring the strategies and everything else into my classroom. So I have and had a body of knowledge around teaching, which this methodology has allowed me to take out and have a look at. And it's also taught me to value that, which again, as a practitioner, is hugely important. For me, it's very important in a teaching and learning situation that I value the learning that the other person brings. So again, this methodology allows me to consider that. It's self-study action research, and it's the methodology of choice for my work because it has certain qualities. it allows me to see myself as a living contradiction. I hope I've conveyed to you that sense of being a living contradiction. And I don't think, it's not a one-off thing, this is a continuous thing in my practice, where I'm continually having to check my actions against my values. And here, doing this, all of these things, it's whether or not I'm actually living my values through what I'm doing in my practice. It uses action reflection cycles, which I think are very comfortable for teachers. You know, teachers are natural, they act, they reflect, they act, they reflect. We do it all the time, so it's an easy process to live with. Also, it allows me to use my values as explanatory principles. And what I mean by that is, it allows me to say, explain what I do in my practice against my values. So it allows me to hold up my value of inclusion and explain what I'm doing in terms of inclusion, in terms of inclusive practice, for example. And it also uses procedures of personal and social validation. So in other words, what I did in my MA dissertation, what I will do in my thesis, is explain the values on which my practice are grounded, and I will actually ask and use those values as standards of judgment. So I will ask people who read my work to use my values as standards of judgment to decide whether or not I'm living those through my practice. But alongside that, I will also use social validation, for example, Habermas. Am I being comprehensible, for example? Am I explaining myself in a way that's comprehensible? Okay, so going back to my initial question, if you like, how do I create my living educational theory? I think I create it by demonstrating accountability for my actions. And for me, as I've said, that's absolutely crucial. I do it by theorising my practice, and I hope I've given you examples this morning of when I have created my living educational theories of practice. I do it by seeking validation from peers. You are a validation group for me, critical friends, all sorts of different things like that. And I use the research process to present my work, and that's very important. I feel a sense of that difference. I've always been a reflective practitioner. I could always give you reflective accounts of what I was doing. The difference here is that I am presenting it as a piece of research. When I've gone to different things over this week, there's two words that have come out. One of them is sustainability. How sustainable is some of the work that we've been hearing? And actually, one of the things I feel very strongly is the sustainability of what I'm doing, because for the first time in my teaching and learning situation, I have actually truly got underneath, or begun to get underneath, what it means to be somebody who's involved in the teaching and learning process. And I'm horrified to think that I've probably gone all the way through my working life without truly engaging with what that means. I have a better understanding of myself as a learner, which I think is important if I am working alongside people who are in the business of teaching and learning. The student teachers that I work with and collaborate with are going into classrooms to work with other learners. So it's very important for me, I think, now that I understand that. And I have been over the years to many, many courses, CPD, I've got, we come back with leaflets, all of those things. And I don't know how I ever really meaningfully sustained that throughout my classroom, those ideas. Whereas this work, this way that I'm working now, is, I think, sustainable in terms of my practice. And the other word is impact. What kind of impact do I think this is having? And again, this is a word